Hey, 7th graders, Mr. Eller, another one of our video lessons. Today we're going to be working on number, let's see what, 27, triangular trade. So we should have this already cut out on our map. We should have some lines drawn connecting Europe to Africa, connecting South America to Africa, or colonies to Africa. We should have our map drawn in. We should have our notes down here. I'll kind of tell you where to go as we're going. As always, if you have any questions, hit me up on Schoology. Let me know. All right, here we go. Let's get out of this. Move this slideshow. There we go. All right. So the triangular trade was in fact a triangle. Now, when we talk about this later on in probably between 9th and 10th grade, there's going to be multiple triangles. For us right now, it's Americas to Europe, Africa, Europe to Africa, and then Africa back to the Americas. Now, there's going to be a bunch of different things going in between there. But for now, this is what we got to know. So this is what you are drawing on your line. You're writing on your line that went from Americas to Europe. You're going to put raw materials, okay, natural resources. These are things that Europe is going to make, okay? So they're going to use those products to make. So you're going to see raw materials, natural resources, lumbers, furs, sugars, cotton, tobacco, rice. A lot of those products that we talked about going through with the Columbian Exchange, they're going to be sent from the colonies to Europe. Why? That concept of mercantilism, right? England, France, Spain, the Netherlands are going to get those materials from their colonies, bring them over, and then they're going to make things with them and sell them back. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but for right now, things that are coming from Americas to Europe, think natural resources, okay? Natural resources. All right, so Europe is then sending goods to Africa. So what is the goods that are sending to Africa? They're going to send them some manufactured goods, okay? So things that are made. So they're going to take some of those raw materials. For example, they may take some lumber from the Americas and build tables or furniture out of them. They may build tools out of them, and those are going to be sent to Africa. Textiles are basically clothes. Now, we're not sending a shirt. We're sending the cotton to make a shirt or the linens to make a shirt. Guns was a big thing. We're going to talk about that with the impact on Africa. They wanted weapons. Okay, they wanted weapons to be able to provide with the materials that Africa was going to send back to the colonies. And then finally, rum, alcoholic drink, again, made from the sugars and the molasses and things like that that are coming from particularly the colonies in the South. The Caribbean nations and things like that, and in Spain, those are the type of goods that are being sent to Africa from Europe. All right, goods coming from Africa to the colonies or to the Americas, if you will. Okay, biggest one is going to be slaves. Okay. We've talked about this before. The number one slave trader in the world was Africa themselves. African nations, particularly those on the coast, were trading for guns. They were using those to fight wars with African trades in the interior of the country, and basically kidnapping people, taking them over, taking them to the coast, and selling them into slavery. That passage from Africa to the Americas could take anywhere from about a month and a half to 5 months. So we kind of average it in the middle and say a 3-month trip. That trip is called the Middle Passage. We're going to be talking a little bit more about that next week. The key thing for this is about 20% or so. That's kind of an average. I've seen numbers as high as 40% of the African slaves that were taken from Africa to the colonies did not make it during that 3-month trip. We'll talk about why a little bit later. But when we talk about, 10 to 20 million slaves being brought over from Africa, that's the number that made it. So you got to add probably another 5 to 10 million or so. We're talking into the 20 to 50 million Africans were taken away from their home and sent to the Americas into slavery during about a 200 to 300 year period. This is a huge, huge impact on Africa. But that is what the colonies wanted. They wanted those slaves to help produce those raw materials to send to Europe. Europe would send those guns, textiles, rum, finished products to Africa, and it would keep going around in a three-part triangular trade. So why the slave trade? Why does this become the big thing? Well, we talked about this. Those pesky Native Americans, that was the first group that Columbus and his fellow traders thought that they could be slaves. One problem with them, they were dying. They were dying due to diseases like smallpox. Native Americans were being wiped out. 50 years after the arrival of Columbus, 90% of the natives where he explored were already gone. This was not because of war. This was not because of famine. The number one killer of Native Americans is going to be diseases. The scary thing about this for the Native Americans is they had never seen this before, okay? At least with things like smallpox. The other scary thing is lots of times this happened before they even saw Europeans. So the disease would come first, then the Europeans would come in. Many Native Americans were thinking some really, really bad stuff, end of the world type stuff with the diseases spreading and things like that. But the number one killer of Native Americans and the number one cause of the slave trade was death of Native Americans due to diseases like smallpox. So let's talk about the impact. Let's talk about the impact for Africa, okay? First of all, 10 to 15 million are forced to be slaves. Now, we talked about that number is probably low because many of them didn't make it. So we're probably talking, I've seen estimates as low as 20 to 25 and as high as 50 million. It's going to cause wars in Africa, all right? And you can see kind of from that artist running below, the Africans themselves, little known, talked about part of history, were very involved in the slave trade themselves, going into the interior, fighting wars, raiding tribes, capturing and kidnapping their other African tribes and bringing them back to the coast to trade. So for Africa itself, this was a great loss of population. It was a great cause of instability with wars and things like that. And it was a big loss of life and a big loss of kind of potential. The Americas, number one, you're going to have the growth of plantations and farms throughout the colonies, particularly in the South and in the Caribbean. You're going to have a strict social order developing based on race. You're going to see the whites at the top of that social pyramid. You're going to see Native Americans and African slaves near the bottom of that pyramid. And with in the white section, which is always going to be above the people of color, you're going to see a class distinction develop with the rich being at the top. Not so many middle class, but those middle class folks in the middle, and then the poor folks down at the bottom. Disease is going to wipe out an entire population. Within 100 years, 90% of, not 90%, that was in the, about 65 to 75% of the native population is going to be down within probably 200 years of European arrival. And that is not because of war. Number one killer of Native Americans is going to be disease. Impact on Europe. Europe is going to get extremely wealthy off of all of this through their concept of mercantilism. All right, you're going to see changes of cultures. We talked about this with the Columbian Exchange. Food, clothing, and goods is what we're going to call cultural diffusion, okay? Meaning we're going to take those tomatoes from the New World. We're going to take that noodles from Asia, and we're going to mix them together. We're going to make spaghetti. That's something new. That's something from other cultures, okay? You're going to see increases in technology, largely to help with trade, but also due to manufacturing new products and things like that. And you're going to start to see battles and wars over the colonies. The colonies were making European countries money. They want that territory. When two countries don't agree, what happens? Usually going to lead to war. All right, that's going to do it for our flip lesson on the triangular trade and the introduction to the slave trade, which is going to be a major part of that. As always, if you have any questions, make sure you're hitting me up on Schoology. Till later, guys. Out.